The letters of the alphabet can be introduced to the children and recapped through posters which are there in the books. They can be done through stick puppets, and they can be done through the rhymes and stories. So we have a whole bank of stories for you, one for each letter and sometimes even more. The stories have been pictorially represented in the stories and the reading skills. This is also to help children to build vocabulary. They may not be able to read the stories right from the beginning, but definitely if you read to them, if you let them to see the pictures, they can build a good vocabulary, so that when they see the words, they should be able to recognize them and retrieve them from their vocabulary bank. So you have some stories in level beginners. You have some of the stories in the level 1 and the others in the level 2. Because they are thin booklets, they can always be exchanged and children can have an access to all the stories. You also have the story bank given to you in the e-books. You can print this out for your reference. You can modify the stories. We have given you stories which are a little long, but you can shorten them, you can change them. You can share them with the parents. We also are going to give you a drop down of the activities suggested with the stories. This is again going to be a tool in the e-books which can tell you whether you can make puppets for the children, whether you can use material like a mirror for the children, how you can integrate sight words for the children. So there's a whole list of activities which has been done and is ready for you. And now time to tell you a story. So we'll start with the story of Annie the ant, Addie the alligator. We ask for these stories to be repeated in all the 3 years because you can modify them and you can let children revisit them. So here is the story of Annie the ant. Annie was a small ant. Addie was a big alligator. They lived near the lake. Annie saw an apple tree, but the apples were really high. So she requested Addie to pluck the apples. So Addie plucked the apples, they cut the apple, they shared the apple, and then Addie shook the tree and so many apples fell down. Then they collected the apples and they became really good friends. You could go slow, you could get children to do the actions with you, and this could be just a picture reading activity for the beginners. Now when you come to level 1, you can actually repeat the story and tell them, do you remember the story of Annie and? Pause a little, use it like fill in the blanks. Maybe they'll say Addie, or if you say the ant and they may use the word alligator. So the ant was, be quiet, and the child may say small, and the alligator was pig. They saw an apple tree and then they plucked the apples, they cut the apples, they shared the apples, they collected the apples. These are all words that the children can fill in as you're telling them the story because they've already heard the story before. Now these children come to level 2 and the story of Annie and Addie is done again. Put them in pairs, let there be buddy storytelling. Let them face each other and tell them, do you remember the story of Annie and Addie? And they can sit down and narrate the story to each other. They can draw small pictures. So the same story can be used for all the 3 years in different ways. We'll take you through the story calendar. The templates of this calendar are again given in the e-books. So you have the ant and the alligator, Bantu and Bablu. So the use of and, they use a lot of the words that begin with the sound b, the bat and ball, bees and butterflies, balloon and bubbles, bread and butter, bun and biscuits, bees, butterflies, bench. So there are a whole lot of vocabulary words that the children listen to. At the same time, you're drip feeding the sight words into the stories. The cap seller and the monkeys. the duckling and the chick, the ant and the elephant, which can be used so beautifully to teach them position words and prepositions, the fox and the grapes, where we've modified the story slightly, where the goat comes and builds up a heap of mud and climbs and actually gets the grapes and says, aha, they're really sweet. So little modifications to some stories. Geeta and her goat. This little goat keeps looking for her baby. So again, a recap of the position words. A picture reading activity with Joe's birthday party, with the jacket and the jewels and the jeep and the juggler. Ken and his kite, where there's little an activity where this boy is actually running after a kite and doesn't tell his mama. And a little lesson that says, don't run away without telling your mother. The lion and the mouse, the traditional story from our Panchatantra, a very interesting story of monkey who finds a mirror and who keeps looking into the mirror and wondering who's in front of him. So it's also about discovery. We also have a story on the monkeys with the ice a little later. And then the nose is so nice because for smelling you need the nose. So it's another little activity which you can do. Stories modified with science activities. Audie the ostrich, who tells the birds why she cannot fly with the orangutan in the story. Penny the smart parrot. Also another little girl who goes for picnic and another spread for the children to read. Rinny the rabbit and her red ribbon, where a little rat takes her ribbon away and then is scolded by the mother to go and return things which don't belong to them. I've been trying to cut this ribbon for a long time, but each time I'm told if you take something away, you have to give it back. You can't just share it immediately. So a little lesson for the children. The slithering snake. We also have similar stories in the Hindi books. So what happens is the children can listen to the same stories in both the languages and help to kind of Tommy Travels, where the stories are getting a little longer, where the children are now having to concentrate more. So you can read these stories to the children. Obviously the children cannot read this on their own at this stage, but it's more for comprehension and building of vocabulary. You also have Where Could They Be, a little story of how children help their grandma and grandpa to find the chappals and their little stick. Granny and grandpa's farm with the vegetables. The woodcutter and the sage. Johan and the yak, and Zoya at the zoo. So the A to Z and so many stories for you to explore with your children in different ways. Modify them, enjoy them, let them be fun for children.